ki khubor ka bate si TV. Lawan Rashapi taka Frank Motors. Booking open for the new Nexon. Visit Frank Motors or call 7045207973.
Kum shibanta bante lakam yagi Nongdie Madan harut surok bat kum juru banyada ya ka hok jongki. Ka Sorkar kami kalawan ra da ka Street Vendors Protection of Livelihood and Regulation of Street Vending Act 2014 hagaba yaki rule on sa Thaw daki Sorkar jala. Bantaw yaki rules ka draft Meghalaya Street Vendors Protection of Livelihood and Regulation of Street Vending Scheme 2023. Ya kabala menjur daga jinyalang ki kanhon Menteri Sorkar mentagasngi ka khat pratarik Risau arjar arpulai. Lembaga ni ka Sorkar ka habban pej langru ya ka Kyndon kamban yo ya ka kamai kaji jonggi Nongdie Madan harut surok bat kumjuru ban pentikna hagabaya dei bat kimat jongga syongsuk syongsan bat ban nomwet ya ki nongya nongyeng.
As you are aware that there is a central act adopted, passed in 2014 called the Street Vendors Protection of Livelihood and Regulation of Street Vending Act of 2014, under which rules were framed by the state government in 2022. Now, as part of the process of the framing of these rules, a scheme was conceived known as the Draft Meghalaya Street Vendors Scheme 2023. And today this draft was approved by the Cabinet with a few observations and amendments. Basically, the intention of the government is that we strike a balance between the need of providing livelihood to street vendors and the need to also ensure that other equally important issues like law and order, decongestion, and safety to pedestrians, and the fact that, as we observed in the recent fire incident, how street hawkers were a major cause of the delay in the intervention by the fire services in containing the inferno at Kyndon. So today the scheme was approved, and the salient features of this scheme I can share with you. But broadly, it speaks of town vending committees and who will be eligible to be identified as legal hawkers. There are a set of criteria clearly laid down. For instance, the person has to possess an epic issued by the Election Commission of India, plus a certificate of at least 3 years residence in Meghalaya. The vendor should have been vending in a particular spot for a minimum of 6 months, and 3, he possesses a valid trade license in areas that are outside of the 3 normal areas under the control of the Shillong Municipal Board. We have also received a number of suggestions from various stakeholders, including the KHADC, KSU, Sanjog Kirangba Shnong, Hawkers Associations, and today, after very detailed discussions, we have been able to finalize this scheme, and what we will now do next is to immediately take up an inventorization. We will start with the survey of the street vendors and process the applications of these vendors based on the broad framework which I have spelt out. Then we will also be taking up this special planning in order to decide which are vending and which are no vending zones. And the government would also strive to provide dedicated vending zones and market spaces to the street vendors. So broadly, this is what the scheme is as conceived earlier and as approved by the cabinet today. This will be based on the cabinet decision today. We will notify the scheme and also notify the areas which we will be covering immediately. So it should take about a couple of months. In 2 months' time, we will be ready with the registration process. After that, we then decide on which areas will be vending and which areas will be no vending zones. Based on the survey and the documentation process, which I have spelled out, that they have to possess, for instance, an EPIC, that they are voters of the state of Meghalaya, and also that they have stayed in Meghalaya for at least the last 3 years, and that they have been trading or vending in a particular place for a minimum of 6 months, and also that they possess a trade license based wherever the Trading by Non-Tribals Act is applicable. Okay, based on their having met these conditions, we will then separate, the legal from the illegal, and only legal, authorized, registered vendors will be given spaces in the vending zones. The task before us is to decide on which are the vending and which are the no vending zones, and obviously footpaths will not be allowed to be declared as vending zones. Based on this master plan and the identification of zones will be based on certain criteria. For instance, we will make sure that these zones will not impede the movement of traffic, the movement of pedestrians, will not cause law and order issues. Those are factors that will be taken into account. At the moment, talking about open spaces, but when you talk about the matter that you brought up, this relates to markets. We have a plan in mind to also construct hawkers markets. As and when that is done, we will inform.
Yeah, roughly maybe in not only in municipal area, but outside municipal area maybe. Is it also outside municipal area you're talking about? We don't have that, but more or less 3,000 will be there.
But the hawkers
2,000 plus.
register themselves with the office of SMD. What will happen to them?
No, once this is a specific scheme that only today received the approval of the cabinet. So this scheme will ensure that
They are registered.
the registration process is
Legally,
legal now, because this scheme is part of a central act, and we are framing the rules and the scheme in accordance with that central act. Once an area is declared as a vending zone, it will apply to everybody, and likewise a no vending zone. You see, as I mentioned earlier, under this central act, okay, the state had only adopted the act in 2022.
yes.
Right. So that was just last year. And today the government, if you talk of government, this government is barely 7 months old. So now that we are seized of the enormity of the problem, we are determined to, as I said, have a fine balancing between somebody's need for livelihood and others' need for safety and free movement and not causing inconvenience to pedestrians or motorists, which is why this scheme has been envisaged and approved by the Cabinet today. As I mentioned, the requirement for a trade license would mean that it is applicable in areas outside the control of the municipal boards. See, as of today, this is an unregulated trade, right? Where you don't even know the exact number of persons involved in that trade. Whether we would know whether that person who avails a license would today sit in Night Ukra and tomorrow shift to Polo. So how do you regulate unless you have the scheme in place? So, which is why today we have approved this scheme in order to be able to regulate vending, and it is only when we do that that any authority can, issue licenses. For instance, there is a role for the Darbar Shnons, okay, that they shall also have to furnish a certificate from respective Darbar Shnons. Now, unless you have a scheme in place, how does the Darbar issue a certificate for somebody who keeps moving from one locality to the other? Yes, the whole purpose of the scheme is to facilitate registration of these hawkers based on certain parameters, and once they fulfill the criteria as defined by those parameters, we will then have a list, and this list will be put up before the vending committees, the town vending committees, which will then approve the list accordingly.
We have stationary hawkers, we have mobile hawkers. A person who sits in the particular place is a stationary hawkers. A mobile hawkers need not be a vehicle hawkers also. It may be a person who is carrying vegetable from one place to another place. So it includes all that. And we will have also a special thing on called night hawking, which we will declare some particular zone for night hawking from a particular time, from a certain time to maybe 7 to 10 or whatever. Okay, so hawkers, there are day hawkers, there are night mobile hawkers, and a night hawking zone will be also planned. According to the planning authority, we will have some night hawking also. In which road?
Kajong bakin jong kat bakiman, sisin bang ila declare menta ngila map choy area. Ngila map nang tu ngin sa declare kino gidegi vending, kino gidegi no vending zones. Kino gijaga belong ban kai, kino gibamlong. Dala dep kata ngila buru ba the prescribed dimensions along 2.2 square meter area and not more than 3 meters for vertical vending from the ground. Madan, Halor.
And which street will be one side, which street will be both sides, all that is specified in the scheme. After the survey is done, after registration is done, then certificate of vending will come, then in which area, how many hawkers will sit, the holding capacity also will be calculated. And that's the thing.